Welcome to our talk, the place where we agree to disagree. My guest today is Rajiv Chori. Our topic is loss of words. Hello, Rajiv. How are you?
How are you, Rene? Good to see you.
Same thing. You're currently, I guess, in Florida. Is that correct? Correct?
I am in sunny Florida. It's a beautiful view out the window, so pretty distracting, but I think you are more appealing.
Here is sun setting. It's still a nice view, but more importantly, the lake in front of my house, I visited it this afternoon. It was 14 degrees Celsius, really cold.
Oh, yeah, it's 26 degrees here.
Well, there we go. Um, Rajiv, I'd like to spend a few words to my viewers, introducing you a little bit as best as I can. Some of it was already said. Um, you are living in Connecticut and also in Florida. I guess you're alternating depending on the climate.
No, I moved to New York City from Connecticut.
Okay. Oh, you're no longer in Connecticut. You're in New York
Yeah.
City.
This summer we moved. Yes.
All right, good. Still, same thing applies, probably depending on the season you're up there.
Yeah.
I met, dear viewers, Rajiv 30 years ago in Hong Kong when we both trained to become Reiki teachers, Reiki masters. At the time, Rajiv was an executive at Citicorp, and he was busy with a banking career, ending with him sitting on a number of boards of directors, from which last month I think he resigned from the last seat. For the framing of our philosophical, spiritual conversation, loss of words, I'd like to give you a little bit of a spread and show you the world where Rajiv has come from, and show you an excerpt from a video he gave a few years ago.
The process that you followed to actually get onto a board?
Well, in my case, the process was purely accidental. Okay, it wasn't something that I was actively out doing. I mean, I was doing what I love to do, which is...
You know, Rajiv, this was the key sentence to me. When I did my research, we spoke, last Wednesday, and I did a little bit research on you. What could I find on the net? And I came across this interview. And this sentence, I do what I love to do, because you may know I'm quite busy with reinventing organizations of all kinds. And I think the key element today and for the future of organization, but also of schooling, is actually intrinsic motivation, loving to do what one does. I think that's something very important. Who knows, maybe later we get back to it, but let me continue with the video.
Give my time to external forums, so associations, community activities, not-for-profit. I was, raising funds for United Way. I joined the board of some not-for-profits. I was visible in the community. I was part of the Chamber of Commerce and giving speeches in associations.
So it was you actually, I think...
Visible. So not only I was visible in my own industry, which is banking, but I was visible in other forums as well. So as a result, I got a recruitment firm approached me to join the board of a cable company. So that's how I joined Charter Communications. Because I was visible in the community, then people would ask me to join the board of something or the other. So I joined the board of Father Flanagan's Boys Town, which is, again, a 100-year-old organization. It's a Catholic organization. I had the unique privilege of being the first non-Christian chairman of a Catholic organization ever. So I was chairman of Father Flanagan's Boys Town. But all this happened because people saw me, people met me, and they wanted me to participate.
So a lot of this And this is also a question, is this a recipe to actually the success in your life? This, what I perceive, curiosity to be out there in different fields, meeting people. I know we're not on the topic of loss of words. It's maybe still searching for words when you were making yourself available to the marketplace, to society in general. Tell me a little bit about this inert, intrinsically motivated curiosity. Am I right in what I am assuming here?
Yes, you are, Rene. I mean, I go back a long, long time, when I was maybe 9, 10 years old and playing out with my buddies, on the field. And at the end of it, when you sat down in the evening and we were just chit-chatting, and people are talking about all kinds of mundane stuff, and I would look at the sky and see the moon and the stars, and I would wonder the significance of each one of us and what we were saying or what we were spending time on. So, that's something which, I didn't decide to do. It just a thought which came to me, and I didn't realize at that time, but later on it struck me that, that's not how everyone else was thinking. It was something that was coming from within. So, and that's something which has taken me through my life, brought opportunities, presented scenes, people, and things. But so it's not something that I actively chose to do. And, it just happened.
This is why I wanted to make a little bit of an excursion into your banking world, because for most people that's quite a stretch, because they also heard your interest in spirituality, and obviously, the title which we have chosen is directly alluding to spiritual or philosophical questions. So how did you come out? Where did you grow up? You grew up in India, great deals, and where was the jump off to the executive world? Can you briefly lead us through this?
Sure. I grew up in India, in Delhi, and so growing up there, I did my schooling there, and then I did my undergrad in the engineering college called IIT Delhi in Delhi. And in those days, we are now talking about mid-60s, when I went to my undergrad school at the age of 16. Engineering was considered to be the best career. It wasn't something, once again, at the age of 16, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I just knew that I wanted to do something. And I kind of got guided into a competitive exam, got selected, and there I was studying engineering. And
would you say that I did meet your mother, of course, many years ago. Would you say that you grew up in a specifically spiritual, for the lack of a better word, spiritual environment, a spiritually conscious environment? Was that true for your family or your environment, or is it in fact true for India as a whole? Because Prime Minister is in the UK is of Indian descent. Okay, I think he was born in the UK and he's through and through British, of course. But still, I'm curious about, in your specific case, whether the spiritual environment was present and had already a influence on you, or whether you even think that this was like everyday's life and this is how India still thinks today.
Well, India has changed a lot since, but when we were growing up, I was born when India got independent and became a republic in 1950. And I grew up in a home where education was of highest priority. And my parents, pretty open-minded, even though, India is highly religious, but that doesn't mean it was segregated religious. We celebrated every religious festival, whether it was Hindu, Muslim, a Christian, so it was pretty open. I read most of the religious literature, both Hindu, Christian, and Islamic, before I was 10. I was allowed, there was no prohibition on reading Quran or anything. It was just, I was allowed to do what I felt like doing. So I wouldn't say it was a spiritually inclined, but it was a open, accepting, tolerant, inclined middle class upbringing. And we were allowed to do what we wanted to do.
And here we are, so many years later, we have a topic, loss of words. And I had to look because I wasn't sure, is it lost for words or is it loss of words? And I'm listening to you and so rhetorically, so eloquently, you express yourself, and yet when we spoke last Wednesday about the possibility of having a discussion today, you actually said you're a little bit at the loss of words, and I picked that up and I said that's a good topic. Say something to why is loss of words for us today such an important topic?
I think you picked it up right. It's to me, it's both loss of words and loss for words, and it reminds me of an incident in 1972 or 73. I was doing my grad school in business, and we were invited to another convent college of girls, where one of the ladies, who's now a friend of ours, she was running a contest, and the contest was that you had to fill in blanks, and the person chosen with the best comment was going to get a prize from the Mother Superior. And the filling the blanks was, she had written on a board, "Happiness is," and we had to fill in the blanks. And a lot of people wrote many words and so on. And I just went there and put a full stop after is. And and people didn't laugh as much as they were very skeptical and thought I was being smart alecky. But what they didn't know that I actually meant it. Until today, when I think of words, all those words which were put after happiness is couldn't explain what happiness is. But I thought my full stop did. But words to me, while I've had to use a lot of words in all my life, in my working life, personal life, you can't avoid it. But I find the words sometimes cause more confusion, sometimes complications, and yet they are not able to explain what is truly intrinsically felt. So, other people give the example of, if you try to describe what is sweetness, no words can explain it. You just have to experience it. So there is experience on one side and words on the other. So similarly, when we're talking about any deeper or a lighter subject, I get at loss for words saying, how do I explain this? So just to give you another simple example, I've lived in 5 countries, and I've moved around. I've lived in 14 different cities. I've managed businesses around the world. And as I moved around, when you're sitting next to somebody and meeting them, one of the questions which is first asked is, where are you from? And most people are very easily able to answer, hey, I'm from Connecticut. I'm from this place, and because that's where they grew up and they spent bulk of their lives. And I would say, oh, now what is this person asking me? Am I an American? I am an Indian. I'm an Asian. I'm what? And where am I from? And so I would be at a loss for words in those situations. So, and no amount of explanation could explain where I was from, because I was from everywhere and I was from nowhere. So,
well, of course, the child who put the full stop after happiness is a full stop. and the grown-up who is being asked where are you from, and is pondering that. In the background of all of that is, of course, a more deeper reflection of existence as a whole. And when we met in Hong Kong, and you did your own studying, I did my own studying. We had moments together, particularly revolving around Reiki. But one of the books I got attracted to was, let me just get it here, the I Ching, and describing Tao. And the very first sentence of the Bible for all the Taoists in the world, the I Ching, says the Tao that can be described is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be spoken is not the eternal name. And quite similarly, of course, in Jewish religion, there is no name, or the name of God is not being uttered because it is beyond words. And that child, when it made a full stop, already had subconsciously or whatever way, obviously at that time you hadn't read any of the smart books because Ramana Maharishi is, of course, the essence of what he's saying is exactly that. We are now in the very moment, and obviously that was present at that moment, and that knowledge, that wisdom, that enlightenment of the child just making a full stop there, that is a moment of awe, of splendor, of consciousness being truly one with everything, you know, that, like the essence of the Namaste greetings. I've mumbled on. Would you agree more or less, or rather would you expand on what I said if you do agree?
Yes, yeah, and that is where our topic comes into play, which is that we are now into a subject where language is limited. It is not capable of describing or expressing. So from the old days, the methodology which was used was, one of them you cited in the Taoism, and in the Hinduism it's called neti. Neti means not this, not this. And so they used a couple of techniques to explain or attempt to describe what is indescribable. And one of them was not this. The other one is using pointers, because something you can point to, but you cannot describe it. And one of the stories which I came across later on is a mythological story in the Indian system, which is there used to be an emperor, and he was the most powerful emperor. He had everything he wanted, and all the wealth, health, everything was at his disposal. And one night he had a nightmare, and in the nightmare he sees that his kingdom was attacked by another king, and despite his being the most powerful, he is defeated, and he's arrested and he's brought in chains in front of the other king, who mistreats him and finally takes away everything from him and exiles him into the forest. So he goes into the forest, and he has not eaten for several days, and he's looking for food, and he's saying, what happened? I had everything and now I have nothing. And he's searching for food for days, and he's literally crawling, scared of animals and so on, and suddenly he sees a half-eaten apple on the ground. He runs for it, and he grabs it. Just as he's about to take a bite, a squirrel jumps and snatches the apple from him. And he doesn't have that, and he lies down on the ground, and he starts howling. And then he wakes up. And he wakes up on his royal bed, and he's got everything. And he sits up, and he says, is this real or was that real? And he keeps repeating this sentence, and everyone comes and say, what happened to the king? And the queen comes, and the princes come, and everyone comes, and he says, was that real or is this real? So he wouldn't do anything else. So finally, one of the gurus in the kingdom came and met him, and he asked him, he said, was that real or is this real? And the guru says, were you there when you had nothing? He said, yes, I was there. I experienced it. He said, are you here now, who's experiencing all this wealth? He said, yes. He said, well, neither that was real nor this is real. You are the only real.
Wow.
So there is no other way of saying this except to provide a pointer.
This is a bit the dilemma we have. I mean, it's a paradox that you and I should speak about this topic and use words to speak. It's a little bit paradoxical. And yet, of course, in communication, that's a very important part, even though it is well known that a great deal of our communication is actually nonverbal, even if we do use words and talk. You know, listening to the story you just said and to the guru's advice, before I get there, say something about guru or gurudom, because I find that this is, and I'm talking to an Indian gentleman, so I want to grasp the opportunity and get rid of that question, because the word is so often used in different ways. And we Westerners, we have a big hang up about the word guru. It's very esoteric, new age, and creates dependency and that kind of thing. So very often we tend to say, well, guru is just another way for teacher. And from all I know, that to some extent that is true, but it's making maybe small of something which deserves a little more elaboration. Could you please?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I could expound on it and spend thousands of words, but you know, this reminds me of the question. Same question was asked to Deepak Chopra on an interview by Larry King about 20 years ago. And I mean, I'm sure it is there on YouTube somewhere, but I don't know whether you've seen it. But it reminds me, every time somebody says, talks about guru, that reminds me of that answer, because the question was, Larry says, all right, Deepak, can you tell me what is guru? And Deepak Chopra, without batting an eyelid, looked at him and he says, spell guru to me. And Larry says, what? He says, yes, just spell guru to me. And Larry says, G-U-R-U. And Deepak replies, he says, G, you are you. So I don't think there is a better answer to that question than what Deepak gave. So I'm giving full credit to him. It's not my answer. But, you know, of course, you know, this gurudom is often misused by many people. It's commercialization, playing on the sentiments and the fears and anxieties of normal human beings. And but, you know, some people find solace and peace in it, and some people get gypped by it too. So let's forget the fraudsters part of it. The distinction that I would make between a teacher and a guru is that there is no teacher without students. And yet, you can be a guru, just is. Guru is there for the teaching, for anyone who's ready to receive it. So, you know, many of us, I know that you have too, been in front of gurus like Balsekar and other people. And when you go there, there are a number of people present, but each one takes away something different from the same words which are spoken or unspoken. And that is because they are ready for that part of the teaching. So I would say that a guru is imparting deeper knowledge to the level the recipient is ready for.
So the recipient would put probably his question in form of words, and the answer from a guru would be beyond words. Is that a fair summary of what you just said?
No, guru. Some of the gurus give long answers in words as well, depending on the student that they accept. I shouldn't use the word student, depending on the recipient who is present. And they bring down the language to their level. And therefore, the language being used for one individual can be misunderstood by another individual who attributes different meanings to those words. But those words were meant for that particular individual. So that I've seen that happening. It has happened with me. It has happened with other people. So the guru has the ability to communicate at that level of the recipient.
Okay, understand. You're touching again on an important thing that we hear things differently. We have viewers out there listening to our conversation, and basically each of them is listening through his own filters, through his own biography, and he will have consciously, subconsciously a degree of selective hearing with words. And depending on his choice, he, of course, will get his preconceived opinion validated, or his choice may also be to reflect on his belief systems and on his preconceived opinions, and be open to suggestion that maybe there is a degree of truth beyond that which he hears through his filters. When you spoke earlier, when I interrupted you with the question of the guru, it actually reminded me you've seen that that the Nobel Prize this year for physics was given to quantum physics, which how did I get into this spot trying to explain what quantum physics is? In words, but basically I think the award was given for the proof of something which in spiritual terms has been known for a long time, but in the world of empiric science it has not been validated, and that is in the quantum physical world that one piece of light, for example, emanating from the same source going into different directions, the moment you change one of those ends in the direction, no matter how far apart, how many zillions of light years they are apart, the other, its twin brother or twin sister, basically will respond to the change, actually to the contrary, to the opposite, and balancing. And of course, I'm at the loss of word right now. I don't know why my mind went there. I see you nodding and giggling. Can you maybe put sense to my own words, please? Spirituality and quantum physics?
In my times of teaching, the students that I attracted were from the corporate world mostly. And people would wonder that how is it that somebody like me who was in corporate world, international, global corporate world, was engaging in something which a lot of people would call it witchcraft, voodoo, and funny stuff and whatever. And one of the things that probably appealed to them, because I attempted, and I used to tell them that I'll make an attempt to give you a scientific explanation because of my scientific background. But I always would also say that, look, science doesn't create anything. Science, by definition, is only explaining what already exists and is constantly endeavoring to keep on discovering what already exists.
Yeah.
Okay. So whether it's quantum physics or black holes and creation of black holes and all that stuff is just, or talking about 1 million, billion, trillion light years away, you suddenly take a picture of it and put it on Facebook or whatever. It's still so far removed from where we are. Okay. And some people are, it's like, just to bring it down to today's context of vaccines, there are people who don't believe in vaccines. Okay. And some people believe in vaccines. Now, there is science which says this works, but it also said it works only 85% of the time. Okay. So nothing that science says works 100% in any case. As far as deep spirituality goes, the questions of spirituality have been arising ever since the existence itself. And that is why the oldest of literature which exists, at least I'm aware of their existence in the Vedic system in the Indian religions. Every question that we talk about today or try to answer has already been asked and answered. I mean, it's amazing when I read some of the Upanishads and old literature, every question which is being asked has been asked multiple times and has been answered and debated and redebated in multiple times. So I don't see a contradiction between science and spirituality. Science, that's why even scientists of today, what's his name, David Chalmers, who's written a book called The Hard Problem of Consciousness.
Yes.
He's trying to explain consciousness, but you cannot explain it, and experience it. But bringing it to the words, it reminds me of another story, which is of another king who had one prince, one son, but this son never spoke. So he was all the time worried that my son doesn't speak. How is he going to take over and become the king at any time? Anyway, the prince had grown up. He was about 20 years old, and he still wouldn't speak. So, he called a lot of teachers and gurus and to help him, but this guy wouldn't speak. So one day, one of his ministers went for a walk with his prince to the palace gardens. And there, the minister was trying to make him speak by talking about the different subjects, deep spiritual subjects, the politics, the war, whatever, but this guy wouldn't say a word. And while they were roaming around, there was a peacock sitting on a tree. And the peacock started speaking and making the sounds of piu, piu, whatever. And after some time, this guy who was trying to make this guy speak got very irritated, took out his gun and shot the peacock. And the peacock fell. And this prince ran to the peacock and picked him up in his lap and started caressing him and said, "If only you had kept quiet and not spoken a word, you would be alive." So words, sound can create more trouble. And this prince innately knew that being the prince, he was the target in the palace politics, so he wouldn't speak. But it comes from within. And other people didn't understand that he understood.
Nice story, making a good point. It reminded me of Albert Einstein, who reputedly didn't speak for the first 5 years of his life. And then one Sunday morning, they had breakfast and there was soft-boiled eggs. And little Albert said, "Mommy, the eggs are undercooked." And the whole family said, "But Albert, you can speak. Why didn't you speak earlier?" And he says, "So far, the eggs have been all right."
Yes.
It's an interesting topic. I find it and we had a lot of, particularly you contributed with amusing stories which were beautiful metaphors to transport, of course, a deeper meaning. And I find it very amusing that the modern newsbringer today are like in the old days, the fool again. You know, the emperor always had a fool, and the fool was the only one who was allowed to speak the truth. And all the ministers, of course, were kowtowing. And our fools today are actually our comedians. And it's amazing, particularly during Corona time, it was very intense and political upheaval. Very often we get a lot of interesting information from the comedians, more so than from the anchormen of the news stations. So we are battling a little bit for words, even though we know that ultimately it's the full stop which says it all. So we're coming towards an end of our conversation, Rajiv. Tell me a little bit how, usually a few words, how are you right now, and how are you in context with life, the content, how content are you in your life? Share maybe some of an insight which spontaneously come to my mind, to your mind. It can be another joke if you want to.
Well, you know, I get up in the morning, and the first thing I do, I thank for the experiences which this body mind, which was brought into this world by my mother and father, so I thank them. I thank the planet Earth for hosting this body mind. And I thank this body mind for being healthy and giving me the experiences over the last 72 years that it has given me wonderful experiences. And this body mind and consciousness have given me experiences and the ability to discriminate between what is real and what is not. It's so easy to get engaged and involved with the reactions of this body mind, which are natural, which is intrinsic, because of, you know, you can get into another talk on that as to why that happens and how that happens, but it does happen in that one responds. And I remember this workshop that you and I did together with John, well timed, which was response versus reaction. So, you know, the body mind reacts, and sometimes our response gets engaged with the reaction. And it is the blessing, whether it's the blessing because of my gurus or angels or whatever, intrinsically, which allow me to distinguish between the response and the reaction, that while the reaction is happening, it seems I'm engaging, but I'm not. And so my life today is about going with the flow. I remember this question was asked once to Balsekar, and there was a Jewish gentleman from Argentina who had a very disturbed childhood. And he was sitting there, and I was watching this conversation taking place with Ramesh. And after he listened to Ramesh, they had this interaction for more than an hour. And then he said, so what is the purpose of this life then, if everything is just happening as consciousness is doing everything in consciousness? What am I supposed to do? And Ramesh gave a very simple answer. He said, the purpose of life is to live. Full stop. He said, just live. There is nothing more, nothing less. And of course, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says this to Arjuna as well. But, you know, all this brings you to the same point that I made earlier, that, you know, with all the words and everything, every question has already been asked and already been answered by someone. And if it's only as a recipient have we captured the essence of that question and answer. And that's why the book, which I think Ramesh's book, which is the most popular book, it doesn't say Ramesh speaks, it doesn't say Ramana speaks, it says consciousness speaks. So it happens. So I'm going with the flow. I'm, relishing the joys which are served in front of me. And that's it.
You spoke, and I heard that little boy saying, happiness is, full stop.
Thank you. I'm at a loss for words after that.
Join the club. I just enjoyed that very brief moment of silence because it's a nice ending to our conversation. What you said, and that full stop which you made at the end of our conversation, and which you described, which you made as a child at school. The only thing left is for me to say thank you to you, to express my gratitude to you that you invested some time here. Thank you very much, Rajiv. I wish you a nice day still. And I'm saying for now, goodbye to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rene. Enjoyed it too. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste. Dear viewers, thank you very much for having watched. Please subscribe, please donate, and most importantly, watch again in 3 weeks' time.